It was a time where, I felt like, why? Why am I going through this? I was just like, God, I've been a good person. I've tried to do everything by the book. Like, how does this happen to somebody like me? And then after a while, my mindset had changed. And, it was like, why not you? One. And
Right.
then I thought about it. And lots of times we go through for someone else, not for ourselves.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage.
So there's a moment, you know the one, when you look in the mirror and you don't recognize yourself. When the person staring back looks sick, defeated, done. Shareen Clark had that moment once. She saw a photograph of herself and couldn't believe what stress and struggle had stolen from her. And that day she made a decision. The stress wasn't going to kill her before her time. But even farther than that, she experienced a lot of other struggles and triumphs and milestones along the journey. And fast forward to today, the same woman is an award-winning filmmaker with her work featured on NBC. She had her own production company, and of course, she's a published author and a minister and a mother. So she's here to tell us all about her story and the writing tips that brought her book to life. Without further ado, Shareen Clark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Danielle. I am so happy to be here. And hi, everyone.
We're so happy to have you also. And a fun fact to the audience, Shareen and I both live in the same state of beautiful New Jersey. So
Oh.
really funny how people can end up sometimes on the other side of the world when we're talking to each other on this podcast, and other times Shereen and I could probably like open our windows and like wave across the turnpike. Who knows? But yeah, thank you for joining us.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation.
Let's dive right in and talk a little bit about yourself. You had a pivot moment at one point in your life when you went from being a business major to switching to film, and I think that that might have kind of, switched the trajectory for you, because then, of course, that led to the events that led to the book and your filmmaking career and everything in between. So tell us a little bit about that and, what caused that transition.
Sure. So, well, what happened too is I got laid off from my job after 10 years. And I had said that I was going to go to school. That was going to be my plan. And so, yes, I had to do a business major first. Through unemployment, they paid for me to go to school. And I took a intro to film class, and that just sparked a passion that I had as a little girl. So I always loved the making of films. And back then, I'm gonna date myself a little. Back then, it was the making of Thriller. It was the making of different things, Flight Plan, and I mean, I was just so fascinated. And so when I took that film class, the introductory, I just fell in love with it, and I decided to change my major.
Right. Well, hey, and obviously you fell in love with it and it kind of sparked that passion for you, which is
Yes.
beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so from there, of course, many other events happened, including your short film, Unemployed, your documentary, Being Gladys, and they won some film festival awards. And I bring this up because, filmmaking does have a lot of interlapping um, similarities between that and writing. So tell me a little bit about that, and did you learn anything from that that you've applied to your writing world?
I learned a lot actually. And then that was another thing too with writing. I've always been told you were a writer, you're a good writer. You need to write, like if I talk to people and they say, "Oh, you need to write," my different experiences and stuff like that. And as far as the films, the short film I actually did, it was my thesis. So that was something that, we had to do screenwriting for. So that was birthed in my screenwriting class. And, screenwriting is so much different than just regular writing. It's more visual than it is telling a story. So it definitely is challenging, but it's definitely worth doing or try to at least take a stab at it at some point. And being on set helped me as well too. The show, I was a production assistant on Enemy Within, and that was an NBC show. And it was so funny because, while I was on my post on the set, I was actually writing, trying to finish my book. And one of the celebrities is like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm trying to finish writing my book." And so I guess, to be honest, the inspiration kind of came through and said, "You know what? Finish this book." And I was writing in between the times that we were doing takes.
So many authors have to find the time to write in between whatever's like going on in their lives at the moment. Sometimes it's finding a moment to write in between dropping the kids off at
Right.
soccer practice, or sometimes it's just like on the treadmill at the gym. And for you, very cool, while working on a film, which
Right.
sounds just like a creative tornado going from the film side to the book side and back and forth. But obviously, it all worked out, and here you are now with "Don't Count Yourself Out," which I think it's the perfect segue into the book itself. I mean, tell me about that title. It's a very powerful one. What were you thinking when you chose those words?
It's funny that you asked that great question. The title actually was changed because the title in the beginning was God Has Been Good to Me. And I started writing in like maybe 2014. And so I would write here and there, I would stop and I would pick it back up. And like I said, in 2019, I don't know what it was. I guess it was just, you know, me feeling like, get this book done. You've been working on it too long, get it done. And I think the most thing that really happened was I kept hearing about people committing suicide. I kept hearing about people feeling I'm depressed. They keep saying, I'm depressed or feeling like I want to throw in a towel. And some of them, not life, but just the things that they were doing. Like, I'm ready to give up. And so I kept hearing these different things. And then I'm like, what can I do to contribute to help people to stay encouraged? And I thought about some of my situations that I've been through. And I changed the book and I heard the words, "Don't count yourself out." And I changed it and I started writing a little different as well. And it just all came together.
Right. Well, that's interesting to think about. Sometimes you might think your book's going in one direction, and then
Right.
life and what you're inspired by shifts it another way. Which,
Correct.
yeah, and there is a lot of, unfortunate things going on in the world where, yeah, these things happen where there are,
Yes.
suicides and everything you mentioned, but it's
Mhm.
good that it leads to you for a source of inspiration, which in turn now you have created something that can inspire others and help
Yes.
others, like, move out of that. Um, so this book actually, based on that, is it's filled with provision stories. Strangers buying meals, a bank refusing to repossess a van, and I can see how these are all things that bring people hope. Which
Yes.
now that I know the reason behind the title, makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Um, Tell me about these moments though, and were you aware that these were God moments as they were happening?
Yes. I'm going to say yes because I knew because things just changed. Some of the situations had changed. For one, you mentioned the van moment. And I mean, that was a pivotal moment where I knew God had stepped in. For one, is because how many times a company, a car company, and they'll say to you, we're not going to come get it. It's yours. And it switched because at first she called me and said, "Oh, we're going to come get it." And yeah, I was like, "Well, come because I cannot afford it." And
Right.
I was the co-signer and my ex-husband, he went and got the van. I co-signed for it. And so he wasn't helping at all. And so it fell on me and I just couldn't do it. I just could not do it. And I told the lady, I'm like, "Well, listen, come and get it." I literally, I told them that and I literally went outside. I took all my stuff out I took everything out the van and I said, you know what? They're going to come and get it. I took everything out and I was not going to hide it. It was outside my apartment. And I said, if they come and get it, it's fine. It's fine with me because I was tired. Everything was on me. I was tired. And I'm like, just come and get it. And so she said, well, I'm going to call you. I'm going to speak to my managers. I'm going to call you back in like 2 weeks. And so I'm thinking they was going to come and get it. 2 weeks come. I didn't hear from her. Maybe the third week she called and she said, she said, we can't come and get your vehicle. That's your vehicle. And so I said, well, I cannot afford it. So, what are we going to do here? And she says, well, we'll work something out. So she's like, well, can you make a payment today? I said, lady, I just told you I can't
You can't
afford it.
afford
I
it, yeah.
can't. And she ended up saying, well, listen, we can post date it, just give me whatever you can, number one. And then she said, because it was 3 months behind. Let me say that. It was 3 months behind. And what she said, we're going to put the 3 months. She said, we'll put that on the back end. She said, we're going to start you fresh. And she said, whatever you can give that. And that's how it ended up happening. And I had someone, I was trying to sell it. And so a couple from my church, they took over the payments. And so that's how that worked out. They never came and got the van. They eventually, the couple, started making the payments. So I had another vehicle and it all worked out. The vehicle ended up getting paid off.
Wow, and how serendipitous too that it ended up being a couple from the church, that just goes to show that it was, the force of, God behind it that helped you
Yes.
get through that. So
Yes.
amazing. But also your book doesn't just talk about those miracles, but also times when you were a little angry at God and, you wanted revenge and you were struggling. So I think it's great that you have a balance of both of this hope and that honesty. Um,
Right.
yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that balance?
Sure. So yes, it was a time where, I felt like, why? Why am I going through this? Why? And I was still going to church, and that really helped me. That helped me because I was in that, I would say, that rut where feeling, a little bit depressed as well, feeling like, why is all this on me? I was just like, God, I've been a good person. I've tried to do everything by the book. You get married, and he was in church as well. So I'm like, how does this happen to somebody like me? And that was just my whole frame of mind at the time. And I kept going to church and I kept listening to the messages. The messages were hitting me. They were hitting me. And, it was softening me. And then after a while, my mindset had changed. And, it was like, why not you? One. And then I thought about it. And lots of times we go through for someone else, not for ourselves. And I started thinking like, wow, and I start repenting as well. Like, Lord, forgive me, for all my gripes, and I think things may have started happening after that as far as the provision that God was providing. And when I start seeing that, I really was just like, wow, God is on my side. God is helping me. I can't have this negative feeling. Yes, I wanted revenge on my ex-husband because I'm like, why are you totally, doing this stuff? And it was just like a whole different person. Even his family didn't even understand or realize who he became to be. And so that was another thing too that kind of helped me, was to see, it's not just, these things are not just being done on me, but it's just a whole different situation going on here. And we were just trying to figure it out. And it was just like, okay, what's going on? But yes, God definitely helped me to see, think of it differently. Your mindset is out of control, and I had to bring it back, come back. And so that's what really helped me.
Absolutely. Well, wow, thank you for kind of showing us exactly, that balance between it. Some things happened because, for the good, but at the end of the day, either it's for you or it's for somebody else. I like the line that you said,
Yes.
if it's not if things aren't going well for you, well, it's because for somebody else
Yes.
might need that
Mm-hmm.
power, that faith at the moment. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I think
Yes.
now might be a good time to transition into the writing process itself, because a lot of authors out there might be experiencing the same sort of events that you've been through, and they're wondering how on earth did you take all of that about that hardship, the trauma, the betrayal, and the hope as well, and put it into a book like you did. So, what was it like to relive these experiences on the page?
When I first started, it was again, the title was God Has Been Good to Me. And so I started writing with that in mind. So I started writing about all the, the good things that had happened, even in the midst of what I'll say a storm, life challenges and the things that we go through personally. And then I heard the words, don't count yourself out. And so I
Yeah.
had to kind of like put a beginning. So the part where you get to my testimony, I had started with that first, with God has been good to me. And then when I heard the words, don't count yourself out, that's the beginning of the book. So that's pretty much, how the writing part was. And like I said, I would stop, and then I felt like, okay, I'm done. Then I would come back to it. But after I really committed to it, it just kept flowing. It's kept flowing. And when I was deep writing my testimony, the tears would flow. The tears would flow, and I would feel the release of, all the frustration, the knowing that I had to forgive this person to go forward. And so it was a cleansing experience for me. But I will say that anyone who wants to write, sometimes you feel stuck, sometimes you have writer's block. But if you just start writing anything, whatever comes to your mind, just
Yep.
write, even if it's for 2 minutes, because a lot of people say, oh, I don't have time. But even if it's for 2 minutes. And then a friend of mine had said, take um a notebook and pen and put it everywhere. Put it in your purse, put it in the car. And after a while, I understood exactly what she was saying, because once I started going, it really started flowing. And even to the point to where at night, if I was asleep, I would wake up and I would either grab my phone or grab my notebook and a pen, and I would write. And once you get started, it's hard to cut off, and it just flows and flows and flows. So, for my experience, that's what happened. So, I would just admonish anyone who wants to write, just start, write anything, write what comes to your mind. And then, just keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. Even if it don't make sense, just get it out. Once you start getting out and you go back and you'll see, okay, and then you'll start to shape it once you get it out.
I love that. I love that you said that. So many people like want to write, but they're stuck. One day I'll get started, one day I'll make the time. And I like that you said that. Oh, start writing and it'll flow. And I like that word too, because once you get in the groove and you're inspired, the words will come to you truly.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
But hey, really cool to know though that throughout that process of writing, the book's out and people are being moved by it and inspired, but even more so, you're making this into a film as well. Is that true?
Yes, I want to. I have not started the writing for it. I'm trying to look at what angle, what story I want to tell. So it I will do it. I was actually told, listen, like, this is your story. You gotta do a film. So yes, I am going
Right.
to be looking into that.
Okay, well, awesome. We'll definitely be on the lookout for it. So if people want to be in touch and be connected and know about, what you're up to, the film or any other projects to come, where can they head to get connected?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram. You can follow me at Shareen CLK. And also, if you want the book, I'll show you what it looks like here.
Oh, great.
So if you want the book, it is on Amazon, but if you want it signed by me, and I also give out little bonuses as well in packaging. So if you want that, you can go to www.don'tcountyourselfout.com.
Wow. Well, there you go. And make a signed copy. That's really special. And it's wonderful that you do that for others and just shows a little bit of personal meaning behind it, a connection. I love that. So, guys, we're going to put the link in the description box of this podcast. You can go
Yes.
ahead and click on over and get in the know and um, and of course, be connected. Keep up that strength by just being part of Shireen's circle.
Yes, absolutely. And if
Yeah.
if there's, questions or anything, just send me a message and I'll definitely respond.
I love that. Well, you heard it here, guys. That's how we can do it. But as we begin to wrap up, I'm curious to know what other bits of advice might you give to authors out there, especially ones who might be writing specifically about an unfortunate moment in their life, about some sort of a trauma or a something, just something difficult. So where do you start? How do you approach that vulnerability? You've been through it yourself, so what helped you, and what might help others?
What helped me was I just realized that it was my story, my
Mm-hmm.
testimony, my story, because when other people are involved, you do feel some type of way to where you feel like, you may not want to tell the story. You may not, you may feel like, wow, I don't want people to get mad at me. I don't want this. I don't want that. And you have to just put it in your heart and your mind to say, this is my story. And for me, it wasn't to bash my ex-husband at all, because at the end of my
Right.
book, at the end of the story, I do mention that I forgave him. And I do mention in the story, family don't feel any type of way. This is a long time ago. It's over.
Okay.
And his family has read the book. His father came to me and was like,
Oh,
the book
wow.
is good. Like, this is amazing. He's like, you're bringing people to God. And he loved the book. And I was shocked. First of all, I didn't even know he had the book. And I was just shocked because you never know how people feel. And, on the flip side of that, if it's a true story and it's really traumatic, and it's a lot of people in there that is family or somebody that I would suggest to do it as a nonfiction. I'm sorry, do it as a fiction, and
Mm,
also change the names. Make sure
okay.
that their names are not in there. Depending upon the story, the traumatic situations that happened, and in that way, that'll kind of protect you, and you'll feel better as well. But if you're feeling stuck, like I said, just start writing. Even if you have to journal every day until you can, get to the real meat of the story, and that will help you. And then if it's really, really hard to where it's hard for you to even try to think about it and stuff like that, I would say, take your time. Take your time with it. Write it out. Write everything out, even if you're not going to put it in a book. Just still write it out. And then, like I said before, shape it. Writing is rewriting, I was told, especially with screenplay. Writing is rewriting. So don't even think about it. Just write it all out. No one is looking at what you're writing at the time. And then you can go back and figure out, okay, piece by piece, do I want this? Do I want that? And you can start from there, and that should help.
Absolutely. I love that. And thank you for all those tips. It's important for us to have a stepping stone from which to start from, just like that, especially with topics that are so delicate like that. So we really appreciate that advice. And all of the advice that you shared with us today. I think it's been a very profound conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, and listeners, well, you heard it all here. Check out Shareen Clark's story. And if you or even if someone else is struggling financially, emotionally, spiritually, just grab a copy of Don't Count Yourself Out, or head to the link in the description box of this podcast. You can, get in touch with Shareen yourself, just like we talked about. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us.
Yes, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. And also, real quick, if I can say, I
Oh,
also
please.
just released, and it's an ebook and it's on my website as well. It's called the 30-Day Devotional Workbook. And
Okay.
that is amazing. So check that out. And yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it.
So that sounds like a practical guide on what to implement maybe what you've been telling us in Don't Count Yourself Out. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
I love that. All right. Well, there you go. Kind of a manual for surviving what might feel impossible. The things that Don't Count Yourself Out inspire you with. This workbook will help you, find actual steps to take. I
Yes.
love that. Really great companion or just another book.
Right. Yes.
Love it. Okay, so guys, you heard it here. Check it all out. And until the next episode, keep writing, keep reading, and keep inspiring. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
Bye, everyone.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or a leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, Head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.